Hi, you're listening to Defend Your Time, brought to you by Ontinue. I'm your host, Chris Taylor. Defend Your Time is the podcast where we help you get stronger security, better value, and fewer headaches out of your Microsoft security investments. On today's episode, I'm joined by Drew Perry, Chief Innovation Officer at Ontinue. We're going to visit our 2024 predictions now that we're approaching the year's end. And in this conversation, Drew and I will discuss breaches affecting AI companies, homegrown ransomware groups, and we'll spend the majority of our time covering the rise in passkeys and passwordless security. Drew, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to an interesting discussion.
So last year, or at the beginning of this year, you helped to write Ontinue's predictions for the year. Let's talk about what were some of those big predictions and how did we do?
Yeah, it's always hard to gaze into the crystal ball into the future and make accurate predictions, especially in our world of cybersecurity, which is rapidly changing. But interestingly, some things don't change. The fundamentals, the same problems time and time again. We're still dealing with a major breach announcement every once in a while from large companies, and there's more to be done on all fronts.
So one of your predictions was that we would see some breaches from some of the large AI companies. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
So AI and AI companies have spun out of what seems nowhere over the past couple of years, and some of them have struggled again with fundamental cybersecurity best practice and protecting customer data. So that goes to show no matter the size of the organization, we all face similar problems. And not even Microsoft have spared themselves from this with quite a major leak recently. But the good thing about that is it's on some major changes to the organization, such as the Secure Futures Initiative, to ensure things like this don't happen again and major issues dealt with relatively quickly. I think an example of this is OpenAI, coming from a research lab, now one of the biggest companies in the world, or soon to be one of the biggest companies in the world, with their huge valuation and investment round that they've just received. This just goes to show that protecting customer data, protecting large language models, training data is absolutely core to the safety of all of us going forward. So a lot more to be done and a lot more being done in that space.
Drew, the second prediction that you made was a resurgence of hacktivism and homegrown ransomware operators. Let's talk about what we've seen here, groups like Scattered Spider, for example.
Yeah, so that prediction was relatively on the mark. Maybe not so much on the hacktivism side, but definitely around the homegrown ransomware operators. So Scattered Spider breached MGM Entertainment. They breached the Caesars Casino in 2023. But what makes them interesting is they're not in the country and operating from countries that you would expect. The actual operator and boss of Scattered Spider was arrested back in June, and he was based in the United Kingdom and arrested in Spain. So it just goes to show that that threat is locally grown sometimes, and it's not always about the more traditional countries where this type of activity is a bit more accepted by law enforcement and they are able to operate. But in saying that, not all ransomware groups are successfully operating. A lot of operations have been put in place, like Operation Endgame and Operation Kronos, by a global coalition of law enforcement to actually take down these gangs, take down the ransomware operators. So good things are happening in that space, but again, it comes back to not paying the ransom. If there is an opportunity to make money, a bored person or bored youth may go down that path if not educated correctly to hone their hacking skills and put them to good use.
Right. Imagine the old quote about why do they rob banks? Because that's where the money is. It seems like regardless of where you are, if there is a sort of decentralized ransomware economy and opportunities to plug into that, you'll find bad actors everywhere.
Absolutely. Follow the money or cut off the money source and cut off the problem. So on the path to good things in that space based on that original prediction.
All right, fantastic. Let's talk about the third prediction you made. You called it the death of the password. One of the bigger trends we've seen this year is what Microsoft calls phishing-resistant passwordless security. So talk to us about why passwordless and passwordless security is so important.
It's absolutely critical because fundamentally humans are not good at remembering long pieces of information like a password. We like to reuse things. We like to do easy things. We like to write things down on bits of paper, which sometimes is good, sometimes is bad. So when we implement passwordless and what are called passkeys, which is based on cryptography of public and private keys, it removes that human error from the equation. So you're able to frictionlessly log into all of your services without a password using either biometrics or a device that you have to actually get that access very quickly and easily. It's critical because at the end of the day, attackers target identities. They phish and do spear phishing users to gain passwords. This can be stopped with the likes of multi-factor authentication, but again, that's another step in the chain. So when you log in with multi-factor, you might need to open up your Authenticator app to put in a code from there, but with passkeys and passwordless, it removes that from the equation fully.
Can you just explain in sort of basic terms, what is passwordless security? How does it work? How is it possible?
Well, passwordless is based on what is known as passkeys. And passkeys are a passwordless authentication method designed to replace traditional passwords. And it replaces them with a more secure, user friendly experience. So it uses public key cryptography to securely authenticate users without the need of passwords. So you create a passkey on a trusted device like your phone or your laptop. That private key is securely stored locally, and then only the public key is transmitted during the authentication process. So when you try and log on, it sends the challenge to the device. The device uses that private key to sign the challenge, it sends it back, confirms your identity, and absolutely no password is transmitted. So, since this process is often biometric enabled, it means you actually log in with something you are. It could be your face, it could be your fingerprint, and it just makes the process much smoother, more secure, and ultimately faster for the user.
So this is one of those rare things where it's easier for the user and it leads to stronger security. It almost sounds too good to be true. What is preventing IT and security leaders from rolling this out more broadly?
I think there's two things that are preventing this. One is education of not just IT leaders and IT practitioners, but also users and the ability to do this. The second is support for legacy applications and legacy protocols and environments. So the FIDO2 Alliance, which is an organization pushing for this to become a stronger and more adopted mechanism, are making this much easier these days as well with the release of materials to help developers integrate into passkey solutions like YubiKey or existing processes leveraging Entra and other providers like Google and Apple. But ultimately, I think it is awareness. And since currently, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's why we're talking about this topic and getting the word out there that this solution exists.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And you mentioned FIDO. Last week, the FIDO Alliance met in Carlsbad, California, and they announced two initiatives. One of them, the Credential Exchange Protocol, to make it easier for passkeys to be passed across different ecosystems. Anything you can say about that?
Yeah, I really like that. So then that's going to have native integration into password managers. So the likes of KeePass or Bitwarden or OnePass or whatever solution you might prefer. And it just, again, makes the process a much easier. What I'm liking is the continued and increase in adoption of support for the likes of YubiKeys. So I personally have been using YubiKeys to log in to any of my personal accounts for many years, leveraging a Google solution there. The good thing is that means I've been phishing resistant for years now. No one's been able to get into my inbox unless they've physically taken this key from me. It's also removed the need for me to remember a password anywhere. This reinforces a recent change in Azure where any global admin accounts and admin accounts have multi-factor authentication enforced on them these days. What made that challenging is the use of break glass accounts, because all of a sudden, to get access, emergency access back into your tenant, if, say, you had been compromised and needed to reset all passwords everywhere, that could have been quite a challenge because you would have had to have had a password on that. But now you can protect that break glass account with a YubiKey or two YubiKeys, so the global admins will always have secure access into an environment in an emergency situation. So a lot of good things being done in this space.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Drew. So this is the podcast where we try to help security and IT leaders who are invested in Microsoft get more out of their Microsoft security investments. So can you tell me what resources does Microsoft make available to somebody who's trying to roll this out into their organization? Or what are just some things they might want to keep in mind as they start to roll out more of this passkey approach?
So what you could do is you could integrate your passwordless strategy into Defender for Endpoint and the wider Defender suite. So you can actually enable a passwordless option to embrace the likes of Windows Hello for Business, your FIDO2 security keys like YubiKeys, or directly with your Microsoft Authenticator app. And what you can do with that is you can link it to your conditional access policies. So when a user is flagged as being risky, Defender and your conditional access policies can then reinforce future sign-ins or any further activities. You need to validate it with your passkey or with your passwordless solution. Beyond that, you're also able to automate quite a bit of threat response on the back of this if you're leveraging the likes of Defender for Identity or Sentinel on the back end there as well. So ultimately, this all works towards a best practice zero trust architecture within your environment.
I just started doing some basic Google searching. One of the first things that comes up are a lot of point solution vendors advertising that they can help you kind of achieve this passwordless security. Is this a situation where somebody on Microsoft Defender should be looking at bolt-on solutions or point solutions, or is this something that you can accomplish within your existing licenses?
All of this can be accomplished today within your existing licenses, whether that is an E3 or an E5. You've got the capabilities to enable this out of the box today.
Another question for you, Drew. Is there anything from a compliance perspective that is kind of driving towards this more passwordless approach?
Well, interestingly, recently NIST have updated their guidelines for password use. Although this doesn't directly relate to passkeys and passwordless, they have finally changed their guidance to say you must change your passwords every 60 to 90 days. The new guidance actually states that you only need to change a password if you suspect there has been a breach. And this is a major step forward driving compliance because a lot of people have had the burden of having to change their password often. And again, that leads to insecure practices. Humans like simplicity, they don't like to remember complex things, and they like to reuse passwords. You know, how often do you just add a new number on the end to a password and reuse that somewhere? In the UK here with NCSC, there's been major strides over the past few years to adopt pass phrases, so 3 random words, which has strengthened this. But again, if you have to pick 3 random words every 60 to 90 days, you're probably just going to change that last word. So adopting passwordless solutions, multi-factor authentication, pass keys, and all the good stuff that we've talked about today is finally reducing that burden down. So hopefully very soon in the future, we won't have to remember passwords anymore. We'll just open up our device. We'll be ready to go, ready to work, or ready to hack the planet. Fun times.
Sounds lovely. Thank you, Drew. And thank you for listening. This is Defend Your Time, brought to you by Ontinue. If you're looking for help implementing a passwordless security strategy in your organization, drop us a line. We'll include a lot of the resources that we mentioned on this podcast, on the blog post, and on the resources associated with this episode. Thanks again, and have a great day.